Behaviorism Theory of Human Development. Presentation by Mrinalini Barmate. Introduction of Behaviorism. Behavioral psychology or behaviorism is a theory suggesting that environment shapes human behavior. In a most basic sense, behavioral psychology is the study and analysis of observable behavior. The behavioral perspective is the psychological approach that suggests that the key to understanding development are observable behavior and external stimuli in the environment. History of behaviorism. Behaviorism dominated experimental psychology for several decades, and its influence can still be felt today. Behaviorism is largely responsible for establishing psychology as a scientific discipline through its objective methods and especially experimentation. It is said that behaviorism was formally established with 1913 publication of John B. Watson's classic paper Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It. Some famous behaviorists: Ivan Pavlov, Edward Thorndike, John B. Watson and Rosalie, and B. F. Skinner. Ivan Pavlov. Ivan Pavlov was a Russian physiologist best known in psychology for his discovery of classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is a type of Classical conditioning is a type of learning in which a stimulus acquires the capacity to evoke by another stimulus. During his study on the digestive system of dogs, Pavlov noted that the animals salivated naturally upon the presentation of food. Pavlov discovered this form of learning almost accidentally while conducting his research on the dog digestive system. J. B. Watson. J. B. Watson is said to be the founder of the school of behaviorism. J. B. Watson was a psychologist who played an important role in developing behaviorism. He is remembered for his research on the conditioning process. According to Watson, psychology should be the science of observable behavior. Psychology, as the behaviorist views it, is a purely objective experimental branch of natural science. Its theoretical goal is the prediction and control of behavior. In his most famous and controversial experiment, John B. Watson and graduate assistant named Rosalie established a small child to fear a white rat. They accomplished this by repeatedly pairing the white rat with a loud, frightening noise. They were also able to demonstrate that this fear could be generalized to white rat, furry objects other than the white rat. The ethics of experiment were often criticized today, especially because the child's fear was never discontinued. In the experiment, he was able to discover classical conditioning. He believed in behavior so much that he illustrated by a quote offered by John B. Watson, deemed the father of American specified world to bring the Mupin and will guarantee to take anyone at random and train him to become any type of specialist. I might select doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant, chief, and yes, even beggarman and thief regardless of his talents, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors. Edward Thorndike. Edward Thorndike was an influential psychologist who is often referred to as the founder of modern educational psychology. He is famous in psychology for his work on learning theory that lead to the development of operant conditioning within behaviorism. He introduced the concept of enforcement and was first to apply psychological principle to the area of learning. Thorndike studied learning in animals, especially cats. He devised a classic experiment in which he used a puzzle box to test the law of learning. Edward Thorndike put forward a law of effect which stated that any behavior that is followed by pleasant consequences is likely to be repeated, and any behavior followed by unpleasant consequences is likely to be stopped. B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner was an American psychologist, behaviorist, author, inventor, and social philosopher. He was a professor of psychology at Harvard University. The work of Skinner was rooted in a view that classical conditioning was far too simplistic to be a complex human behavior. He believed that the best way to understand behavior is to look at the causes of an action and its consequences. He called this approach operant conditioning. A Skinner box, also known as operant conditioning chamber, is a device used to objectively record an animal's behavior in a compressed item frame. An animal can be rewarded for punishment for engaging in certain behaviors, such as lever pressing or key picking. Skinner identified three types of responses or operant that can follow behavior: neutral operant, reinforcement, and punisher. Reinforcement from environment that increase that probability of a behavior being repeated. Reinforcers can be either positive or negative, whereas punishment responses from the environment that decreases the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. Punishment weakness punishment weakens the behavior. Albert Bandura. Albert Bandura was a Canadian psychologist. He proposed social learning theory. Albert Bandura agrees with the behaviorist learning theory of classical conditioning and operant conditioning. However, he adds two important ideas. Mediating process occurs between stimuli and responses. Behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observational learning. In his voodoo doll experiment done by Bandura, it is illustrated that children observe the people around them behaving in various ways. Areas of application: gender role development, behavioral therapy, phobia, education, behavior modification, psychopathology, depression, relationship, moral development, aggression, addiction. Advantages of behaviorism: it is rigorous experimental methods of research, enhances the credibility of science as a scientific discipline. It provides a strong arguments for the nurture side of the nature and nurture debate. The approach has provided a number of practical applications and techniques to shape behavior. The use of rewards in education. Criticism of behavior. Many critics argue that behaviorism is one-dimensional approach to behavior because it does not account for other type of learning different than conditioning. Some people claim that behaviorist views do not count for moods, thoughts, and feelings. Factors beyond our stimulus are involved in our responses, and because of this, a more complete comprehension of behavior would need to further include the inner mind. Some dispute the statement that behaviorists make about conditioning being universal. The summary of the presentation: the law of effect and the principle of reinforcement are among many insights that survive the school of behaviorism today. Nevertheless, we feel the influence of decades of behavioral research in various modern day settings. For example, for behavioral principles are commonly applied in behavioral and cognitive behavioral therapy to create powerful change in one's behavior. Behavior modification is also commonly used in classroom setting to encourage appropriate classroom behaviors and discourage potential disruptions. Overall, behaviorism has led to research on experimental influences on human behavior. Thank you.